Thanks very much, Louise. 11 years. 11 years she's been waiting to do that. Can I first of all congratulate Tony Snell, our new party president. And Tony, you've done a magnificent job for the party for many years. You deserve to be our president. You have the confidence of this room and the party, and be careful what it leads to. Can I also congratulate our new vice presidents, Norma and Peter, and our new treasurer, new members of the administrative committee. Can I, of course, acknowledge Louise, and can I particularly acknowledge my friend, my colleague, and the other architect in our team. I use that term with emotion rather than professional status, Peter Ryan, the leader of the National Party. I think this is the first occasion Peter has been at a Liberal Party State Council. He's nodding. And it is an honour to have him here in these circumstances, and what a pleasure. Can also acknowledge Peter Walsh, Peter's deputy, and again a member of the leadership team. All my fellow ministers, MPs, federal MPs, and can I particularly acknowledge Julie Bishop, who's here, Deputy Leader from West Australia. I know Julie's looking forward to some West Coast action later on this afternoon, but you're getting some East Coast action right now, right? Can I also acknowledge Tony Abbott in his absence. I had the pleasure of being here yesterday, and he's doing a mighty job for the Federal Coalition, and look out, Tony's coming. I did challenge Tony last night to, or challenged him yesterday to have a swim with me this morning. He ummed and ahed, and then he challenged me to a bike ride, so we both ummed and ahed, and we put it off for another occasion. Can I also acknowledge those federal members of Parliament who are retiring, Judy Troth, Julian McGorran, and those who missed out, Jason Wood and Fran Baillieu, who missed out the election. They've made huge contributions to the party, and we all owe them a debt of thanks. Can I of course acknowledge all of you and our staff and our families, particularly for members of Parliament. They put up with an awful lot. But I do want to just say a word of thanks on your behalf, on behalf of the Parliamentary Party, to David Kemp and Anne-Marie, who's here, and to thank David for his incredible service to the Liberal Party, to the interests of the Coalition, to politics in Australia, and to the Victorian Division in particular. There's not much more we could have asked of David. He's just about done it all. He's done it with extraordinary grace, with dignity, and with a good mind, and he's brought people together, and without him, we would really be in a difficult situation. David, thank you for your service. And likewise to Andrew Ronalds and Robin Head, who retired as Vice Presidents, to our Treasurer, who's retired Treasurer, and other Administrative Committee members. And I know Tony Nutt's here, and I'm going to thank him particularly in a moment. But to one and all, thank you for being here. We're here at the plenary facility, and this is one of the great gathering places in Victoria. And I'm very proud to have served on the trust that runs this building and the exhibition centre next door. And I had the honour of doing that for some years. And this building is here on the lower reaches of the Yarra. And the lower reaches have been a meeting place here for hundreds and hundreds of years. And it was in these lower reaches at the freshwater falls just a few doors upstream from here that Indigenous communities first watched settlers arrive. And they came obviously from all over the world, and on this stretch of river together built a city and a state which I believe is unrivalled in this country. And this really is the state where anything is possible. And I acknowledge, and I take this opportunity to do it, I acknowledge and pay tribute to all of those, past and present, including our Indigenous communities, particularly in the best spirit of this Reconciliation Week, whose love of this land, whose connection to this place, and whose care for our country have made this our home so special and so treasured, and whose civic legacy we enjoy every single day. And please don't underestimate the civic legacy in this state. That legacy was built on a core character of ambition and aspiration for this state. It's a spirit and a culture which I believe is at the heart of this state, and it's about striving to be the best. It's a culture that's made our state such a welcoming place for multicultural communities, and I believe, again, that that's at the heart of what makes this state good. And it's that core character that I believe will always come to the surface in this state, and I believe it's very much on show in this room. Delegates, I am, as I've said to you before, proud to be a Victorian. I am proud to be a Liberal. I'm proud to be a member of a coalition government. And I'm honoured and privileged to be the Premier, the Liberal Premier of a coalition government in the great state of Victoria. And I've been to many state councils over the years. I was trying to rack up the other day, and one day I will do that count. But I've got to say, it is a joy to be here today, and it is a pleasure to be in government. And I am just as delighted for all of you. I know how hard you've all worked for so long, and I know how much the result in November means to each and every one of you, and to the party, and indeed to the National Party right across Australia. But I do stress this, despite that, we are here and we are in government, not for ourselves, but to better our state for each and every Victorian. And that's why I'm here, that's why you're here, that's why Peter's here, and that's why I believe the Victorian people voted for us in November. We won government. Louise gave you a 9-point plan. I was looking forward to the 10th point, Louise. You'll have to share that one with us later. We won government because we stuck to the plan. We stuck to it. We focused on the issues important to Victorians. We made responsible commitments, and along the way we were disciplined, and we were united, and we were in coalition, as Louise said. And as Louise said, we made the choice clear. The election was a telling moment. There's no doubt about that. Some may have thought it was not possible. We didn't. We did the work. We reached out to the broader community. We listened. We came together ourselves. We drew on that core character. And we won. And I stress, despite what Louise might have said to you before, we won. This was a team effort to each and every one of the party, each and every one of our supporters right across Victoria. We won the trust of the Victorian community, and I can tell you we will honour that trust. And particularly, I want to thank a few people. Obviously, I want to thank our leadership team, the Liberal Party, Louise, David, Wendy, and our previous leadership team members, Phil Davis and Andrea Coote, those who were part of our team in the last 4 years, Helen Shardy and John Vogels, who retired, and National Party leadership team and their colleagues, Peter obviously, Peter Ryan, Peter Walsh, Peter Hall. I want to thank David Kemp again in this context, Tony Nutt, and before him Julian Sheasel, who contributed to this win. I want to thank everybody at 104. I want to thank Michael and my staff in particular, the incredible work they did. And they took a shoestring and turned it into a rope. They took a thread and turned it into a tapestry. They did a fantastic job. I want to thank all the candidates, those who won. Obviously, we won enough seats. And I'll come to that in a moment. But there are some who did amazing jobs in victory. Clem in Paran, who took all sorts of issues and blended it together and won the support of the Paran community. Cindy, who just had a few weeks. Brad Batten in Gembrook, fantastic job. And I don't want to single anybody out, but I'm going to. But I couldn't have been more pleased to have won the seat of Baillieu. And Elizabeth has a newsletter which is going out. It's called the Miller Mail. Count me as one of those. I'm a Miller Mail. I want to thank those who just missed out, and we had some fantastic candidates. I do have to stress that, and again, at the risk of singling out, some in Bendigo, Michael and Anita did a mighty job, and Craig and Ben in Ballarat, and Kurt and Alistair in the Geelong region, and Matty Mills in Monbulk. And I do hope that so many of those candidates stick around. They've got a huge amount to contribute. And even those who helped us win seats in other areas, including Sonia in Gippsland East. And I also want to mention those who went the extra mile over the last 4 years. Jenny Maddock in Cororoit, Mark Rose in Altona, who put their hands up when it was hard. They put their hands up when it was hard, and they did a job for the party, and we are so very, very grateful. Now, we've got a team in the Parliament, and I can tell you we are working together. And as I've said to the team on many occasions, each and every one of us is now dependent on the other. The leadership's dependent on the backbench and vice versa. And every one of them is tasked with or understands that their task is to ensure that they're part of that team in everything they do. That's a team that's done the hard yards in opposition. It's a team that knows how precious government is. And I can assure you, we don't want to go there again. We don't want to go into opposition. And I say again, what a pleasure it is to be in government. Now, we are in government, and Peter Ryan is at pains to remind us of that on a weekly basis. We are in government, and we are the government. And we are there for all Victorians. Without the hype or the spin, we promised a stable, responsible, disciplined government. That's what we're delivering, and that's what the Victorian community are going to get. We have a single-seat majority in the lower house. And we have a single-seat majority in the upper house. And that in itself is an extraordinary privilege. And if you looked at the results in New South Wales recently, despite their lower house success, they are still dependent on others in the upper house. We have a narrow majority in the Parliament. That gives us a mandate. It gives us a mandate to deliver our commitments. And we have a mandate to be responsible in dealing with any new challenges, and that's our focus. Now, when we came to government, and you might remember I said last year that it wasn't about November the 27th, it was about November the 28th. We were bequested an economy that had been propped up by population growth, a budget that had been propped up by one-off grants from the Commonwealth for several years, underinvestment in infrastructure, declining productivity, and overstretched services. And on top of that, we were bequeathed a desal plant, oversized, overpriced, problematic model, and now to cost Victorians, and bear this in mind, now to cost Victorians nearly $2 million every single day for the next 30 years, regardless of whether we need the water. We bequeathed a $750 million pipeline. The regional rail link being underpriced by over $1 billion. They just left out some of the price. Mikey, financially and functionally problematic at best, over budget and overdue. The problems with the LEAP and LINK database, and you've heard a bit more about that recently. HealthSmart, a string of other IT projects, over budget. Melbourne markets, over budget, overdue. A string of programs and projects for which there was no forward funding. And, if you need reminding, the lowest number of police and police funding per capita of any state in Australia. Now, when we were appointed, in December, we set about doing exactly what we said we would do. We told the electorate very clearly before the election that we would carefully examine the state's finances, the child protection system, smart meters, remember them, Mikey, the DPP's office, the taxi service, a range of major projects and IT systems, speed cameras. And that's what we've done. We are keeping our commitments, and that's what we told the electorate we would do. And that's what we're doing. And that's what the electorate expects us to do. We said we would reconsider the flawed COAG National Health Reform Agreement, and we did. We said we would get on with the job, and we did. We took the first opportunity to get the Parliament back. We commenced the legislative program, protective services officers, in the first week, and didn't Labor begrudge that. All we did in that first piece of legislation was to lift the cap on PSOs. They didn't oppose it. They put up 33 speakers and debated until 3:30 in the morning, signalling their intention to obstruct everything that they possibly could. Powers to principals of schools, the CFA Charter, the Regional Growth Fund. We've been there with a legislative program, and it's a long program. And we immediately moved to commence rolling out our commitments. And at the risk of just singling out a couple, nothing gave me greater pleasure than to be able to deliver on a commitment to the Yarra Valley Practitioners Project, which is an outreach project for those, particularly children, who have been suffering through the bushfires and continue to suffer. We said we would do that. I'm not sure they believed us. And we turned up in the first few days and honoured that commitment. There were plenty of others. Over the last 6 months, we have, as I said, renegotiated that health agreement. It was flawed. It was a Labor plan. It was flawed, and we opened the doors up on that agreement. We've had in the process to deal with 9 natural disasters, 4 flood events in Victoria alone, a bushfire in Victoria, in Gippsland, cyclone and floods in Queensland, bushfires in Western Australia, and we sent SES workers to Queensland, CFA workers to Western Australia, and we sent nearly 130, 140 Victoria Police to New Zealand for the earthquake in Christchurch. And indeed, we offered our support to the people of Japan through their trials as well. Can I take this opportunity to pay a tribute to everybody who's assisted in the flood events in Victoria. Devastating events affected more than 5,000 Victorians across roughly 20% of the state. Nearly $700 million in direct emergency needs, repairs and support required, and that's not counting the devastation and agricultural losses. I'm desperately proud of how Victorians responded and businesses responded, and I'm gratified by the level of support that people in this room have shown and people right across Victoria. And I got to say, you have to admire the resilience of country Victorians who've endured 10 years of drought and then copped multiple floods. And some on a personal basis have been through it 3 or 4 times in the space of just a few months. And they're still up and going, and they have that core character of which I was speaking earlier in every ounce of their bodies. That's what this state's all about. So thank you to everybody who's been involved. Obviously, we then had to start the budget process, and I take this opportunity to thank the principal architect of the budget, Kim Wells, who's here, the Treasurer. And Kim, with Rob Clark and Gordon Rich Phillips, have done the lion's share of the work there, and it is an exhaustive process. I am very proud of the budget we presented, the first budget under this government. It's responsible, it's caring, and it's dealt with challenging times. Those challenging times have seen enormous shocks to the budget, over $4 billion of GST withdrawn in the middle of that budget process. $2 billion of blowouts and black holes in Labor left projects and counting. $500 million withdrawn from the regional rail project. And obviously money and resources to dedicate to floods and other emergencies. Now, the audit that we undertook and have commenced on state finances has already identified the unsustainable spending levels of the previous government. But in short, this budget's delivered. It's delivered the promised surplus of over $140 million. It's delivered the promised reduction in the growth of spending, which has gone from 8% per year under our predecessors to just over 3% over the forward estimates. We've achieved significant savings of over $2 billion. We've retained a AAA rating, unlike some other states. We've stabilised debt at less than 6% of GSP over the forward period. And, as Louise said, we've delivered on $5 billion worth of our promises in the first budget. We have delivered as we said we would. Now, I don't propose to go into a detailed analysis of the budget, but I do just want to make a couple of remarks. Honouring our commitments is important. Respecting people is important. Gaining people's trust, not eroding it, is important. Victorians not expecting quick fixes or spin. They're expecting us to get on with the job and be responsible. They want to be treated intelligently and be supported in their daily lives. And we have set out honestly the state's financial position and the challenges that lie ahead for all of us. We've addressed those challenges, and we addressed the need to make our streets safer, to address cost of living pressures, to rebuild our transport system. We're improving our health and education system, and we're looking after people who live in regional and rural Victoria as well. And in the great Liberal tradition, we are looking after the disadvantaged and those in need. And this very much is a coalition budget. Responsible economic management combined with a compassionate, caring and inclusive approach which recognises the right of all Victorians to share and participate fully in our society. And we are delivering. Now, just to remind you in a few of those areas, and that commitment to community safety, funding for 1,700 additional police, more than 900 protective services officers, new powers for principals, new powers for licensees, new and much tougher hoon laws. In transport, a $6 billion capital spending program, $100 million additional rail maintenance package, $200 million plus for 7 new trains, new level crossing upgrades in more than $370 million worth of commitments, and starting at Rooks Road and Mitcham, and those who have ever been out that way know how important that is. We've made public speed camera locations, and we've commenced the planning of new stations. In health, we've delivered on the commitment to release a health priorities framework with a Metropolitan Health Plan, and there's more to come. And it is a comprehensive and detailed plan. And I thank David Davis for the work that he's done in one of the most difficult portfolios there is. There's a record $13 billion in spending, more than $400 million for extra beds, $34 million boost for palliative care, and anybody who's had the palliative care experience in caring for loved ones knows how important that is. $500 million boost for elective surgeries and EDs. We funded the black holes in the Children's Hospital and the ONJ. We put $100 million extra funding aside for further expanded comprehensive works at Baillieu Hospital. And we've funded major hospital redevelopments, including, and there are more to come, Echuca and Kerrang and Mildura and Warragul. And in education, a $100 million maintenance fund with an audit to come. Hasn't been done for years. A $240 million boost to non-government schools to allow them to catch up. 150 primary welfare officers. 100 additional maths and science teachers, and $200 million plus capital building program. Record investment in autistic and special schools. Has not happened for years. And we've reinstated TAFE concessions for 15 to 24-year-olds, and that is so important. And on cost of living issues, we've delivered what we said we would do. That stamp duty cut for first home buyers is there in the budget, just as we said it would be. The cut in subscriptions to ambulance services, 50% cut. 12-month energy concessions, right across the year, those energy concessions, just as we said we would. And additional water and sewerage concessions, TAFE fee concessions and reduced licence fees for small country clubs and small businesses. And we've delivered on the commitment to establish the Regional Growth Fund. This is a $1 billion fund over 8 years, and that is going to go so far to helping those communities rebuild, and we're delivering on a $160 million commitment for councils, regional councils, for country roads and bridges. Hospital upgrades, I mentioned them before, upgrades at the Mildura Airport and the Bendigo Airport, and we have released so many country businesses and regional businesses from Labor's strangling Easter Sunday trading arrangements. And we've delivered on what we said about accountability. There's more to come. But we've reduced the number of ministerial staff from 200 to 150, cut out taxpayer-funded political advertising, we've made hospital waiting data public, we've released the costings, the financial information about the desal plant, got new standards, standing orders in Parliament, and we've even introduced fines for members of Parliament who misbehave. And I trust it won't be any of ours. Now, if we had not won, if we had not been successful in November, we can only imagine what might have been the case. We would have had that COAG health agreement that John Brumby and Daniel Andrews signed. Giving up 30% of the GST, putting Medicare locals in place and risking our local networks, putting at risk home and community care, losing control over the hospital systems in Victoria. We would have had a bigger we would have had a much bigger debt, and we would have had a smaller surplus, probably a deficit, because Labor promised so much more financially in terms of commitments. Now, some in the community don't want us to keep our commitments. Some want us to ditch our commitments. Some want us to make new commitments. Some want us to keep the election promises of other parties. Well, what I say to that is there are always some. Some want to pretend there's a magic pudding. Some don't want to be reminded of the mess that was left behind. Sweep it away immediately, some say. Some say there's a magic bullet. Well, I wish that was possible. We will fix these problems in a considered and responsible way. Some may miss the daily circus of government stunts. If that's the case, then some will be disappointed. I suspect that some, in that case, need a reality check. We will deliver, and we will continue to deliver and take a disciplined, sensible and responsible approach. Now, we accept that there are significant challenges ahead of us. There are financial challenges, revenues at state level and indeed at Commonwealth level are tight, to put it blunt. Population growth and infrastructure shortages have led to additional pressures to accommodate that growth, and when it comes to infrastructure, to catch up, let alone keep up or get ahead, because we're in the catch-up phase. Infrastructure funding, we're moving, and Kim Wells has been instrumental in this, to introduce a high-value, high-risk process to make sure that when it comes to spending on infrastructure, we do it in a considered and responsible way. Productivity has been allowed to lapse in this state. It's actually declined in recent years. We've got to turn that around. You don't do that overnight, but we're already putting in place steps to deal with that. We have to deal with the escalating cost of construction, and that is a significant problem for infrastructure. Obviously, we've got to deal with retraining and skills and the so-called two-speed economy. But we've also got to deal with Commonwealth-state relations, federal-state relations. Now, I accept that the Commonwealth has a significant deficit, and they certainly have a significant debt. And there is a degree of uncertainty about some of the positions being taken at the Commonwealth level, whether it's carbon tax, asylum seekers, renewables, solar, green cars, infrastructure funding, and I make the point that Infrastructure Australia has now an empty bucket. For all of that, and for business in particular, that is, to some extent, an uncertainty that's not welcome. But can I remind you, we have a Victorian Prime Minister. Now, I make no bones about it. I've worked constructively with the Prime Minister since coming to the office. We worked closely on the health reform agreement. We reopened that, and we won support of other states once we opened that door. We've worked together on the National Disability Insurance Scheme, and that has the potential to be a huge breakthrough for those carers, those disabled and those families, and I compliment Mary Wooldridge for the fantastic work she has done in championing that. And we've worked together through the flood crisis. But in recent months, Victorians have every right to feel let down by the Commonwealth. In GST, let me just take a few examples, and this is not comprehensive, but in GST, we had a $2.5 billion cut in the GST distribution. Unprecedented, unforeshadowed, unwarranted, a massive hit and shock to the budget. The biggest previous adjustment was less than $100 million. Now, this came at the last minute, as I said before, and it came as a result of a flawed system. And indeed, the Commonwealth, the Prime Minister in particular, now recognises the system is flawed and has called for that system to be re-examined. And that's been commenced. That's fine, we welcome that. Save for two things. We're not getting the money back in the meantime, and that review is going to take 2 years, possibly 3. Now, Victorians have a right to feel let down by that. And the process led to Victoria being penalised in areas where we shouldn't have been penalised, and I've got to compliment Kim Wells on the submission he made to the Commonwealth in that regard. But nevertheless, this state's being penalised. Victoria's going from contributing $123 per Victorian to other states on an annual basis, from 123 to 206 per person. That is extraordinary increase on a short period. And our share per capita of GST, which ought to be around 25%, is actually going to fall from 23% to 22%. The flaws have been acknowledged, but the review is going to take too long and the money has been taken away. On top of that, we then copped a $1.6 billion further reduction in GST receipts. On top of that, we've had the Commonwealth withdraw $500 million from the regional rail link in a delaying process. On top of that, the Grants Commission, the way they treat the regional rail link investment from the Commonwealth meant that the effective investment from the Commonwealth was reduced by over $1 billion. Now, on those floods, and I made it clear, we worked together well with the Commonwealth on this exercise. But earlier this year, the Prime Minister announced, without consulting the states, that a $500 million advance would be made to Victoria within just a few days. Just a few days, it was said. Now, we welcomed that. We weren't consulted, but we welcomed that, and that's part of the national disaster recovery processes. So we were grateful. But then we discovered there were all sorts of hitches, all sorts of conditions being placed on that, and indeed it was later suggested that somehow or other we would have been party to those conditions. Far from it. We'd actually already made the commitment to advance the monies to councils so that they could do that work. And all we would say is, fine, bring forward the money, but let's not play games with it. Now, I will say that that problem's been fixed. And Peter Ryan worked constructively with Simon Crean, and we're prepared to work constructively to solve that problem. And the money's been advanced. But it shouldn't have happened in the first place, because the money went to Queensland without any conditions, without any hitches. Now we find, when it comes to flood support, that Category D, flood assistance, and that's a category in those disaster arrangements, for which we have made application on behalf of people who are still doing it tough. That too has been delayed, pending the requirement now from the Commonwealth for a comprehensive business case associated with that need. You don't need a comprehensive business case. Open your eyes. There are still families with floodwaters across their properties as we speak. We don't need that comprehensive business plan, and that needs to be sorted. The Commonwealth budget. Infrastructure spending on the Commonwealth, of the $916 million the Commonwealth allocated for regional infrastructure funding in the budget, Victoria got how much? Zero. The Commonwealth allocated $222 million for up to 16 what are called EPIC, Early Psychosis and Prevention Intervention Centres, and it was going to be on a per capita basis. On a per capita basis. And we welcome that funding, and we welcome the program. But for some reason or other, Victoria was excluded, and Victoria got zero. In health funding, despite having 25% of Australia's population, Victoria received just 14% of the more than $1.3 billion available funds for regional priority health and hospital funding. Victoria received just 10% of funding available for subacute care in multi-purpose services. Victoria received just 12% of funding for long-stay older patients. And on road funding, Victoria received less than 16% of the available road funding. And $20 million was withdrawn and delayed in regard to funding of the Princess Highway upgrade from Traralgon to Sale. And in addition to that, we are seriously concerned about the direction of some COAG-driven changes being pushed by the Commonwealth. Now, we will support the COAG process. We will support advances on nationally based reform at every opportunity, provided it's excellent, not average. And the Victorian Government unashamedly rejects lowest common denominator outcomes. We want to be ahead of the pack and drive reform, not just be one of the pack. We don't want to surrender our autonomy to set regulation and drive further reform unless the benefits to Victorians are compelling. And sadly, in many cases, that's not the case. In fact, there's every chance some changes will simply increase the size of the bureaucracy and at the same time undermine good outcomes. Let me take vocational education and training for an example. It's so important to increasing training and skill levels. In the budget, the Commonwealth replaced the Productivity Places program, which had $320 million for Victoria over 4 years. And that's now, and that was on the basis of market-driven reforms in Victoria. That's now being replaced, and that is now at risk because of a new proposal for a one-size-fits-all national partnership agreement. And that one-size-fits-all model will penalise Victoria, and that's not good enough. The proposed Tertiary Education Quality and Standards Authority and the Australian Schools Quality Authority are set to take over regulation of the VET system in Victoria. And we have a market-driven system in Victoria already. We've been at the cutting edge of that, and this is going to be a setback. And this is likely to lead to the training system being less responsive to industry and to employers, not more responsive, and will come at a cost to the Victorian system. And Victoria is simply being penalised for having already adopted market-driven reforms in the training arena. And that's not good enough. That's pursuing the average, not pursuing the excellent. Now, occupational health and safety falls into the same category. We would welcome a national approach, and I'm sure business would welcome a national approach, one that reflects best practice and maintains at least the best components of Victoria's OHS system. But instead, Victoria's been invited to take a backward step. And the game in this arena has become one of too many compromises. And they're being made in the name of having the harmonisation rather than achieving the beneficial outcomes. And if that's the result, there'll be little national economic benefit and possibly even a negative benefit in Victoria, and with increased compliance costs and more onerous regulations. Now, I want to just expand a little further on the COAG Health Agreement, because we achieved something in February. We opened the doors, and I can't tell you the speed with which other states rushed in to support us in that exercise with Colin Barnett. And once the door was open, it became patently obvious that the deal that was done last year, in autumn last year, to which our predecessors signed up, was a dud. Now, we opened the doors, we reached an agreement, and that agreement had some additional steps in it to further develop. The undertakings in the agreement that we signed in February were clear, but now we find the Commonwealth's gone off on a frolic of its own again. There was no consultation with the states regarding the legislation to establish a new health performance authority. That consultation was an absolute commitment in the February agreement. The details of the legislation bear little resemblance to that agreement signed in February. That completely undermines Victoria's role as the system manager of our public hospital system. It establishes a new, bigger bureaucracy with expanded powers, and we explicitly discussed that in February and we're seeking to avoid that. And it is as if the February agreement has simply been cast aside. The new draft agreement now proposes penalty clauses, growth funding in arrears, and imposes onerous accounting burdens on the states. That's not what the changes advanced in February were about. The response of the Commonwealth has been to ignore the states and territories who are now saying, hang on a minute, this is not what we signed up to. And the Commonwealth's ignoring sensible, cost-effective proposals for the establishment of the authority. And in the process, all they serve to do is to undermine further federal-state relations. Now, in the gaming area, we went to the election with a well-considered proposal for pre-commitment on gaming machines, and we've been working that up for years. The Commonwealth proposal was the product of a post-election deal with an independent. That deal was more about protecting the Prime Minister than protecting problem gamblers. I say again, we've long sought to provide additional protection for problem gamblers, and our budget demonstrated that approach. But we believe the Commonwealth proposal is flawed, unreasonably usurps state authority, and will unnecessarily undermine the hospitality industry. We will continue to push the Commonwealth to adopt the Victorian proposal, and we will preserve all our options in the event that the Commonwealth does not listen. Now, we've got similar problems in other areas, in aged care, in the not-for-profit sector, in urban planning and in transport safety. And these too run the risk of undermining relationships. What's needed is to work together with a commitment to excellence, not the average. And we will continue to work with the Commonwealth and other states. However, we will not act against the best interests of Victorians. And the Commonwealth has to simply negotiate in good faith. The Commonwealth has to look at best practice and, as I said, excellent outcomes, not average ones. And the Commonwealth must encourage states to continue to drive further positive reform, particularly in regard to efficiency. The ever-increasing assumption of powers by the Commonwealth at the expense of the states comes at a cost to all of us. As the Commonwealth assumes responsibility for service delivery, responsibility for that delivery becomes more and more remote. Bureaucracy inevitably grows, the service is dumbed down, and it becomes more expensive. The BER, pink bats, and who knows how many other programs yet to be identified are recent evidence of that. Now, make no bones about it, and I don't. It's a fact that around 50% of our revenue as a state comes from the Commonwealth. If the Commonwealth wants to mess with the states, they can. But that comes at a price. Extra cost, extra bureaucracy, reduced services. And I simply say this to the Prime Minister: that makes no sense. This state has a history of being a driver of reform. This state is an engine room of aspiration and ambition. And Prime Minister, this state is your home state. Victoria is not seeking special treatment. Victorians want their state treated fairly. We will work with the Commonwealth. Of that, there is no doubt. But Victoria wants a fair go. Delegates, I say again, being in government is great. Being in opposition is not. But don't underestimate the opportunities and the job in front of us. Our political opponents won't go away. The unions supporting our political opponents won't go away. What we have secured in the last 6 months and the months before is the opportunity to govern, to address the problems left to us and to build for the future. And this is a long-term task. And we need your help in that task. We need you engaged in that task and that mission every day, in your work, in your communities, in your homes, in the party. And can I say, in anticipation of your support, thank you for everything you have done for this party, and thank you in advance of what you are going to do in the future. Finally, I want to thank one other person, my wife, Robin. She has been an incredible support to me, just as Trish has been a support to Peter. Robin is so incredibly patient. She is my love, my joy, my all. Now, those of you who were here yesterday got to see that video of election night. To be frank, it's the first time I've ever seen it. I was on the receiving end of the cameras. I'd never seen it before. But Robin's smile that night and the smile of our 3 children simply made me melt. I'm incredibly proud of them all. Delegates, a few years ago, the Coalition found itself in opposition in every government in Australia. It was the first time in Australian history that Labor held all 9 governments, and it's only a few years ago. We were on our knees, some said. Well, I said then, the way back was through the states. Some were dismissive. Well, I tell you, the results and your presence here today, and isn't it nice to have a crowd at this council? The results and your presence here today confirm we got it right. There's more to come. The history of this party is about building for the future. There's much to do. I look forward to having your help to do just that. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you for your support. Thank you for everything you do for this very proud state.